When we see news about conflict, like the war in Ukraine, it can be just overwhelming. It's confusing, it's painful, and honestly, it's hard to know what to do with all those feelings. So today, we're going to try something different. We're going to step back from the headlines, away from the usual analysis, and look at this through a completely different lens. One that seeks clarity not in politics, but in the nature of our own minds.
So let's start with a really big question. It's a question that people have asked forever, but it feels more urgent right now than ever. In a world that just seems so full of conflict, where do we even begin to look for real, lasting peace?
Right away, this ancient Buddhist teaching just flips our whole way of thinking on its head. It basically says that the entire game of winning and losing is a trap. Victory creates hate, defeat creates pain. The real goal isn't to win, but to find a kind of peace that exists completely outside of that endless cycle. But how do we do that?
Well, to see with what we're calling a Buddha's eye view, we have to change what we're looking for. Instead of seeing nations and flags and different ideologies, this perspective looks deeper at the one thing that's happening underneath it all, the universal reality of suffering. And in Buddhism, that's called dukkha. And it isn't just, terrible pain. It's everything from deep anguish to that subtle, nagging feeling that things just aren't quite right. A huge part of this view is the idea of anatta or non-self. Think about it. The borders you see on a map, they're just ideas. They're lines we've drawn in our minds. The Earth itself doesn't know it's Ukraine or Russia. It's when we get fiercely attached to these labels, to this idea of a separate us versus a separate them, that we create the division that makes it possible for one human being to harm another. So, how does that us versus them thinking catch fire and turn into a full-blown war? From this viewpoint, the deepest root isn't just about history or politics. It's about three toxic states of mind. These are known as the three poisons, and they're burning away in the collective human consciousness. So first, you've got greed, or a lobha, that relentless craving for more territory, more power. Then comes hatred, or dosa, which is that raw aggression, the thing that lets us dehumanize other people. And finally, there's delusion, or moha, and this one is key. It's the completely false belief that violence can ever bring about real, lasting security. These three are seen as the universal fuel for every conflict, everywhere. Okay, so that's the framework. But what does it actually mean for how we look at a real war happening right now? This isn't just some intellectual game. Applying this view can actually lead to a huge shift in how we relate to the conflict, and maybe with more compassion. This brings us to a quality called equanimity, or upekkha. And this is so important to get right. This does not mean we approve of violence. It doesn't mean we're saying both sides are morally the same. Not at all. What it means is having the strength to see and understand that there's profound suffering happening on all sides of a conflict. And that is the only way to start breaking the cycle of hate. You can really see how this suffering takes different shapes. For the Ukrainian side, there's the obvious terror and loss, but the spiritual trap there is letting righteous anger turn into a poison of hatred that corrupts your own heart. For the Russian side, the aggressor is creating what's called heavy karma, actions that plant the seeds for their own future suffering. They're often trapped in a spiritual prison built from propaganda, fear, and delusion. The suffering looks different, but believe me, it is deep and real on both sides. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who lived right through the Vietnam War, he just nailed it when he said this. The real enemy isn't the person, it's not the nation. The enemy is the poison inside, the hatred, the ignorance that has taken over that person. This completely reframes what the battle is even about. So, faced with all this, what can we actually do? This isn't about just giving up in despair. This tradition offers some really practical tools. Think of it like spiritual first aid to help us manage our own minds and find some peace even when the world is in chaos. One really powerful practice is called Tonglen, and it's a pretty radical idea. On the in-breath, you intentionally take in the suffering you see, the fear of the refugees, the confusion of the soldiers. You really let it touch your heart. And then, on the out-breath, you send them everything you wish they had. Peace, safety, warmth, clarity. What this does is it starts to dissolve that hard line between us and them right inside your own mind.
In this age of social media and 24/7 news, your mind is literally a battlefield. So the practice is to guard it. That means, first off, stepping away from the endless doom scrolling. It means when you feel that spark of hatred rising up in you after reading a story, you just notice it. You say, there's hatred, without letting it take you over. You can still take action to help, like donating to aid groups, but you do it from a place of compassion, not rage.
And for those moments when it all just feels hopeless, there's this powerful reminder, anicca, or impermanence. Empires rise and they fall. Borders get redrawn. Conflicts that feel like they will last forever are, in the grand scheme of things, temporary. This war too will eventually end. And holding on to that truth isn't cynical, it's a powerful antidote to despair. So, let's pull all these threads together. What this whole perspective is really trying to tell us is that the massive external conflict we see on our screens, it's just a large-scale projection of the war that happens inside every single one of us. That battle between mindfulness and delusion, between compassion and hate. And that brings us to another piece of wisdom from the Dhammapada, one that really captures the heart of this whole perspective. You just can't put out a fire with more fire. It's impossible. The only thing in the entire universe that can actually end hatred is its opposite, a clear, compassionate, and non-hateful mind. And that really boils down to this, maybe the most important takeaway of all. The first piece of territory we have to pacify is the one inside our own heads. Peace in the world isn't some far-off abstract goal. It's the sum total of each of us finding peace within ourselves.
So I'll leave you with this question, a really personal one to carry with you. As you go about your day, just look at your own mind, your own reactions. Where is the first small battle for peace that you can win today?